Marry me. Inside the smoke-choked silver dollar saloon, the wild proposal struck the room silent. Eliza Freeman, a black woman once raised as a fine lady, now branded ruined after a public disgrace, stared at the dust-worn cowboy she had met only an hour before. Nathaniel Carter, drunk on whiskey and lamplight, had spoken an impossible vow. Laughter roared through the crowd, sharp with mockery. Yet Nathaniel only tightened his grip on Eliza's hand, drawing her close as if to defy the world itself. And Eliza, caught between whiskey haze and hollow despair, gave the faintest nod. Was her yes born of liquor, or from the sudden flame that had kindled in her heart? The Crystal Palace saloon had never blazed so bright. Lamplight struck 100 cut-glass goblets, scattering diamonds across the white-draped tables, while a violin's lilt tangled with the laughter of Colorado's wealthy. Outside, September air carried a bite of cold, but inside, whiskey, smoke, and ambition turned the hall into a stifling furnace of power. In a side room behind the stage, Eliza Freeman stood before a tall mirror, her dark eyes staring back at a young woman of 22 who carried the weight of a family's fortune on her narrow shoulders. Her hand trembled as she adjusted the folds of her emerald satin gown, each pleat resisting the frantic rise of her chest. Her thick hair was swept high, bearing the fragile line of her throat, where a diamond pendant glimmered with cold fire. "Hold still, child," her mother, Ruth Freeman, murmured, her voice both tender and severe. She turned the clasp so the jewel lay square at her daughter's collarbone. "This chain has passed through 3 generations of Winslows. Tonight you wear it as their heir. Remember, when this engagement is sealed, no one will dare look down on the Freemans again." Eliza nodded faintly, though the eyes in the mirror looked frozen. None of the brilliance belonged to her. Only the hand hidden in her skirts quivered, clutching fabric as if it were something real. The door swung open. Ezekiel Freeman strode in like a man who had conquered life itself. Dressed in black, smile radiant, he gripped his daughter's shoulder with a hard hand. "Perfect. You are my pride, Eliza. Tonight, all Colorado will see the Freemans as a force to reckon with. Victor Hale commands 40,000 acres. We hold 30. Joined, none will surpass us." His words weighed heavier than the diamond. Eliza drew breath, but only emptiness filled her chest. Ruth clapped her hands briskly. "Come, the guests are waiting." Victor is before the altar with the minister from Denver. Music swelled as Eliza stepped out. 100 eyes turned toward her, some admiring, others cool with calculation. Her gown swept the polished boards, graceful to all who watched, yet each step burned beneath the satin. She reached the altar. The minister shifted uneasily, glancing at his pocket watch. The space beside him lay empty. Eliza halted. Her heart thundered as her gaze searched the crowd. Victor Hale, tall, broad-shouldered, the man whose smile once promised safety, was nowhere to be seen. A stir rippled through the room, growing sharp. Ezekiel's face darkened. His jaw tightened as he muttered low, "Where is he?" Ruth leaned close, her whisper trembling. "His train must be late." Stand tall. Smile 20 minutes, then 30. The orchestra faltered, fell silent. Dresses rustled, chairs scraped. Voices swelled from restlessness to confusion. Eliza forced her chin high, though beneath her skirts her fist whitened with strain. Then the double doors slammed open. The sound cracked, like a rifle shot, silencing the hall. Victor Hale entered. Tall, handsome, shoulders squared with pride. But he did not walk alone. On his arm hung a woman with shining brown hair and a scarlet gown, her laughter spilling into the air. Gold from the chandeliers gleamed on a new wedding ring encircling her finger. Eliza's breath lodged in her throat, her gaze locked on the clasp of their hands, unable to move. Victor stopped mid-hall, his drawl sharp and steady. "Forgive my lateness. There was business to attend." He lifted the woman's hand high. "Allow me to introduce my wife, Mrs. Hale. We were married this afternoon in Denver." The hall erupted. Women gasped. Men barked cruel laughter. Charles Hale, Victor's father, was nowhere to be seen, but it hardly mattered now. Ezekiel Freeman's face drained of color. His hand slipped from Eliza's shoulder to her necklace, squeezing so hard it nearly snapped. Ruth clasped her palms together, choking a prayer that could change nothing. Eliza did not move, yet within her the world collapsed. Victor's words cut like steel. "Your daughter is too soft, Freeman. I need fire. I need iron. She is nothing but silk under the sun." The whispers struck like arrows. "Left at the altar. Her honor's gone. Who would want her now?" The chandeliers still blazed. The violin still lay idle on its chair. But the night had turned into a funeral for the Freeman name. Eliza's hand clutched her gown until it shook. In the eyes of the crowd, she felt stripped bare, consumed. The necklace around her neck weighed like chains, and as Victor led his new bride out, each strike of his boots echoed like laughter, driving home the truth. Tonight was not merely the ruin of an engagement. Tonight, her old life was erased. Eliza stood frozen as whispers swallowed the crystal palace. Her face was carved in stone, yet her heart pounded so violently it threatened to break her ribs. Her father, Ezekiel, lingered only a moment. His jaw clenched, his voice a low growl meant for her alone. "Useless." Then he turned his back, leaving her to the crowd. Her mother, Ruth, collapsed into a chair, trembling hands hiding her face behind a damp handkerchief. Her sobs mingled with scraping chairs, rustling gowns, and words sharpened to blades. Damaged goods. Who would marry her now? Why would Victor waste his time? The hall, once a cathedral of Freeman glory, had become a public gallows. Eliza tried to breathe but found no air. Her heels struck the polished floor, each step hollow, carrying satin and shame together. The great doors opened. Night air swept in, September cold, sharp as knives. Eliza walked out without looking back. Behind her, the crystal palace still blazed with light, still rang with laughter, but for her it had become a grave. The streets of Cedar Ridge lay deserted. Wind cut through shutter cracks, carrying dust and forge smoke. Lanterns burned low outside shuttered shops, casting tired gold across the boards. Her emerald gown, once envied, now dragged heavy with dirt and ash. A heel caught in a crack, nearly sending her sprawling. She braced against the chill of a brick wall. For a heartbeat, she longed to collapse into her mother's arms. But her father's voice rang louder. Useless. Tears threatened. She swallowed them. To cry would confirm what they said, that she was weak, soft, silk without steel. She bit down hard and pushed forward, the broken shoes holding her upright as though they bore her pride as well as her weight. At the end of the street, another glow appeared. Dull, yellowed, smoke curling into the air. A weathered sign creaked. Silver Dollar Saloon. Nothing like the polished palace she had fled. This place sagged with neglect, its windows blackened, its paint peeling. Rough laughter and the pounding of fists on tables spilled into the night. Eliza stopped at the door. A black woman in a torn silk gown stepping into a den for cowhands, drifters, and the damned. It was to throw away the last shreds of reputation. She let out a bitter laugh. What reputation? Tonight, it had been buried. The batwing doors groaned open. Smoke choked her lungs, thick with sweat, whiskey, and stale tobacco. Banjo strings twanged and snapped. Men shouted over mugs and dice. Heads turned when she entered, some eyes gleaming with crude curiosity, some with whistles. Most turned back to their drinks. She reached the bar. Each step was a stumble into foreign soil. Her hand met the scarred wood, its roughness more honest than satin. The barkeep, broad-shouldered with a gray beard and eyes like stone, raised a brow. Not often we get your kind here. What'll it be? Eliza lifted her chin. Her voice rasped, but did not waver. Whiskey. Strongest you've got. The man paused, then smirked faintly and poured 3 fingers into a chipped glass. She laid down a coin, her hand trembling, but when she lifted the drink, no one saw. Fire tore through her throat, burning clean. Painful, but true, not like Victor's promises. Another, she said, firmer now. A laugh came from the shadows. Careful, princess. That ain't lemonade. Eliza turned. In the dim corner sat a man apart, chair tilted back, brim shading half his face. When he looked up, the lamplight caught his eyes, deep brown, steady, glowing like coals banked for the night. Not hungry, not mocking, simply seeing. A gaze that stripped her hollow mask and quietly acknowledged the ruin beneath. She held that gaze longer than she meant to. Her pulse kicked hard. She turned back, drained the glass. Bitter heat seared her tongue, but warmth pooled inside. She had wanted to punish herself, to feel collapse in her very bones. Yet that gaze told her she was not invisible. The man leaned back, faint smile ghosting his lips. No leers, no whistles, just watching. And for the first time since the palace, the weight on her shoulders eased a fraction. His name was Nathaniel Carter. But that night, Eliza knew only this. Across the smoke and clamor, one pair of eyes refused to leave her. And in them, something rare, not pity, not lust, but quiet attention, as if he had been waiting all along. Eliza set down the glass, her hand trembling again. Breath caught in her chest, not from whiskey, but from something else, something stirring inside the frost left by the palace. Her night of wandering, meant to end in drink and tears, had shifted onto a path she could not have foreseen. Music in the Silver Dollar Saloon dwindled as tired players set their instruments aside. Only dice clattered on the tables and drunken laughter echoed. Eliza sat at the bar, shoulders straight, chin lifted as she had been taught, while Nathaniel Carter, the cowboy in the shadowed corner, missed nothing. He saw her hand tremble as she lifted the glass. He saw how she pinched the hem of her skirt beneath her knee to keep herself from falling apart. Eliza took another long pull. Her throat burned. Then she set the glass down. She turned to him, voice hoarse. "What are you looking at?" Nathaniel did not answer at once. He sat up slowly, raised his whiskey, but only sipped. His brown eyes caught the lamplight like a low flame. "Watching someone trying to prove to the world she hasn't shattered," he said, his tone low, part challenge, part understanding. Eliza gave a bitter laugh. The world? The world is just a room full of people tonight. A room where I was auctioned off like goods. And when the goods don't pass, they toss them aside. She paused and inhaled sharply. Alcohol blurred the edges of her gaze, yet her words were clearer than ever. My father, he says it's my fault. That I don't know how to keep a man. My mother cries. They don't need to hear Victor's betrayal. To them, there's one truth. I ruined everything. Nathaniel watched her for a long moment without speaking. He set his glass down and pushed the opposite chair back. Sit, he said. This shouldn't die in smoke. Eliza hesitated, then rose and crossed to him. Her silk skirt swept the worn boards. Her heels struck like a knock on the door to another start. Nathaniel drew the chair out for her, a rare courtesy in this place. When she settled, he leaned in, elbow on the table. They're wrong. She frowned. Wrong about what? You are not merchandise. I've seen 100 women break for less. But you sit here, straight-backed, head up. There's fire in you, Eliza Freeman. And there's steel, too, even if you don't see it. Her chest tightened. Compliments had come before, on looks, carriage, smile. But no one had ever spoken of fire and steel inside her. Something long thought dead throbbed. She turned her face away, watching the barkeep buff an old glass. You don't know me. You only see a girl drunk and suffering. Nathaniel gave a soft smile and did not argue. Maybe. But sometimes drunk truth is what sober thought dares not name. They sat in silence. Eliza rolled the glass in her hand. A bead of whiskey darkened the wood. Nathaniel watched every small motion, the tremor of her fingers, the way they sought the rim as if for purchase. Then he said, abruptly, "Marry me." The glass in Eliza's hand stilled, tracing a pale line across the table. She looked up, eyes wide, unsure if she'd heard right. What did you say? Marry me, he repeated, his voice plain, as if naming a trade for a bottle, but his eyes were no jest. Tonight, she laughed, sharp and incredulous. You're mad. I met you not an hour ago. I don't even know who you are. What else matters? I'm Nathaniel Carter, a man who works with these hands. He held up calloused fingers where lamplight showed pale scars. I have no wide acres, no name, but I give a promise. I will treat you better than Victor Hale ever dared dream. When I look at you, I see worth beyond any contract. Eliza shook her head, forcing a hollow smile. Warmth flushed her cheeks, yet the tremor didn't stop. This is a farce. I was publicly jilted hours ago, and now a stranger proposes in a saloon. It's mad. Yes. Nathaniel's thin smile lingered. But sometimes madness is the only choice when sense delivers hell. Eliza stared. Her mind filled with her father's voice, her mother's sobs, the whispers, damaged goods, the message that she held no value, that every door had slammed. Yet Nathaniel's gaze, sincere, not pitying, offered an exit. It made her, for the first time in years, feel seen as a person, not a burden. The moment stretched taut. Eliza pressed her lips together, hand trembling as it dropped onto the table. If I say yes, she whispered, voice barely there. Nathaniel did not blink. Then tonight will not be the night you are buried. It will be the night you begin again. With me, whiskey spun in her head, despair from the crystal palace pressed down. She closed her eyes for a beat, then opened them. All right, she said, throat thick. Yes. A slow smile crossed Nathaniel's face. No triumph, only the look of a man who had found what he wanted. He nodded once like a promise. The bartender glanced up, eyes wide. A few drunks nearby muttered, then burst into laughter. But Eliza heard none of it. In the smoke and roar, she heard only her heartbeat and the impossible whisper that she had just said yes to a stranger. Strangely, she did not collapse. Instead, she felt breath finally reach her lungs. For the first time that night, she truly breathed. The silver dollar had never seen such a sight. Smoke, spilled beer, and rowdy laughter filled the air as always. Yet in the middle of the chaos, an unlikely wedding was born. Hurried, strange, and almost too unreal to believe. "Anyone know where the preacher is?" Nathaniel called out, his voice cutting through the noise. Bartender Jake scratched his chin and shrugged. At this hour, Reverend William's likely drunk at Murphy's boarding house. But $5 will fetch him. Do it, Nathaniel said, laying down a crumpled stack of bills. Jake grinned, pocketed the money, and rushed out the door. Inside, the crowd of drunks, once only curious, began to cheer. A wedding, in the silver dollar. Whiskey, more whiskey. May the couple last longer than the glass on this table. Eliza sat still, her soft hands trembling against the rough wood. The room spun, half from liquor, half from the absurdity of it all. She had once dreamed of a grand wedding with lace and violins. Instead, smoke replaced flowers, drunken laughter replaced a choir. Then a calloused hand closed gently over hers. Nathaniel. His skin was rough, scarred, yet steady. That touch pulled her back from the whirl. In its coarseness lay something rare, certainty. You can still change your mind, Nathaniel murmured, leaning close so only she heard. Eliza lifted her eyes. Her cheeks burned from drink, but it was his gaze that shook her. If I change my mind, she whispered, what do I return to? Parents who scorn me, a town that whispers. Here at least I have a beginning. Nathaniel nodded slightly. His eyes made no promise of wealth or glory, but they were true. And in that truth, Eliza breathed easier. Half an hour later, Jake stumbled back in, dragging Reverend William by the arm. His shirt buttons were mismatched, his breath heavy with liquor, but he clutched a worn Bible to his chest. Wedding, eh? He muttered, then brightened at another $5 bill. All right, let's do it. A circle formed. The crowd pounded tables, stomped boots, and sang off-key wedding tunes. A few cowboys threw peanuts in place of flowers. Reverend William swayed in the center, voice slurred. Dearly, beloved, gathered here. Eliza bit her lip to keep from laughing bitterly. This was her wedding. Truly. Nathaniel squeezed her hand harder. She looked down at the contrast, his rough, work-hardened palm against her pale, trembling fingers. Two worlds bound by a vow. Do you, Nathaniel Carter? The preacher squinted at his Bible in the dim light. Take this woman, Eliza Freeman, to be your wife, to love and to hold, in sorrow and in joy, until, the Lord calls you home. The room roared with laughter. Nathaniel did not laugh. He looked straight at Eliza, eyes alight, voice firm. I do. A shiver ran through her body. Then her turn. Do you, Eliza Freeman, take Nathaniel Carter to be your husband, faithful and caring? in sickness and in health, in poverty and plenty, until death parts you. Eliza's throat was dry. This was the edge. A no would erase everything. Yet above the drunken shouts and smoke, she felt his rough hand never loosen. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling yet clear. The saloon erupted. Glasses flew, whiskey spilled, cheers thundered. Reverend William nodded, shut his Bible clumsily. "Then, I pronounce you man and wife. Now, kiss." Before she could think, Nathaniel leaned in. Not greedy, not fevered, just steady hands lifting her face, holding her trembling features. His lips touched hers, warm, tinged with whiskey, yet so gentle it stole her breath. Their first kiss. The room exploded with stomps and whistles, but Eliza heard none of it. The world shrank to the feel of being held, being cherished. Her body shook, not with fear, but with a warmth that melted the night's cold humiliation. When they parted, Eliza's breath came quick, her eyes half closed. Nathaniel whispered against her ear, "You are no longer alone, Mrs. Carter." Her heart pounded. That new name, Mrs. Carter, sounded strange but not unwelcome. It was like a door opening. The drunkards kept hollering, throwing bottle caps, singing crude songs. Yet in Nathaniel's arms, Eliza felt something she had never known. Safety. This wedding was nothing she had dreamed. Filthy, rushed, wrapped in smoke and laughter that mocked. But strangely, it was more real than all the lace and roses of the Crystal Palace. And when his rough hand refused to let go, Eliza knew she had stepped into a new life. Not chosen by parents, not for land or ambition, but born of a reckless choice, on a reckless night. A beginning forged in whiskey smoke, yet it was hers. Dawn light crept through the narrow crack of the shutter, pale gold and cold, brushing across Eliza's face. She startled awake, heart hammering. A low pine ceiling above her, smoke lingering in the air. The distant crow of a rooster. None of it belonged to the wide, satin-draped chambers of Freeman Hall. For a moment she could not place herself. Then memory rushed in. Crystal Palace, the humiliation, smoke in the silver dollar, a rough hand holding hers, hurried vows, the first kiss. Fragments blurred by drink, yet one thing clear. His lips on hers, gentle and certain. She bolted upright, tugging the coarse blanket, only to see Nathaniel Carter lying beside her. His shirt lay open, chest broad from years of work, his hair in disarray, dawn striking his sun-darkened skin. Eliza's breath caught. Never had a man lain so close. She pulled the blanket to her throat. Her voice shook. How did we—" Nathaniel stirred, half opened his eyes, and smiled faintly, voice husky with leftover whiskey. "Morning, Mrs. Carter." He stretched, tugged her lightly toward him. The scent of pine, leather, and man closed around her. "Nothing happened," he said, raising a hand before she could stammer. "We wed, we kissed, then fell asleep in the wagon. I carried you here." That's all. Eliza closed her eyes, relief breaking in a sigh, yet tremors lingered. That kiss, the last memory before darkness, was proof that something had already shifted. She rose slowly, taking in the cabin. Low roof, walls of rough boards split in places, a bare table with 2 chairs, a cold stove in the corner. Smoke clung to everything. No velvet curtains, no Persian rugs, no silver candelabras. This was his world, poor, plain, but real. Her gown was wrinkled, hem torn, and caked in dust. She brushed her hand over the wall, cold, splintered. The feel unnerved her, as though she had touched a life she'd never known. Nathaniel sat up, pulling on his shirt. His voice was calm. I know it isn't easy. You're used to velvet walls. Here there's only wood, smoke, and my hands. But if you'll give me time, I'll show you a home can be built from more than gold. Eliza turned, eyes wavering. You think I can live here? I've never lit a stove, never washed clothes, never milked a cow. I know nothing. He stepped closer. She retreated half a pace, but he stopped, gave her space. Then I'll teach you, he said quietly, slowly. You don't need to be anyone but yourself. Her lips trembled. No one had ever said that to her. All her life she had been her father's pride, her mother's hope, the bargain Victor bought with land. Yet here, a stranger in a bare cabin told her she could be simply Eliza. A horse whinnied outside. Nathaniel opened the door, letting light spill in. Come. I want you to see the rest of my life, she followed. The sight stopped her breath. Pasture veiled in mist, mountains dark in the distance, a handful of horses grazing, the faint bells of scattered cattle. Not the empire of Hale or Freeman, but land that breathed freedom. While she stood still, Nathaniel led out a horse. He offered the reins, eyes warm but steady. Come, we'll ride to town for what we need, she faltered. Her gown tangled her steps, her slippers were thin. She had never mounted a horse alone. Nathaniel stepped behind her, one hand firm at her waist, the other guiding her arm. The sudden touch jolted her, heat coursed beneath her ribs. Don't be afraid, he whispered, voice rough at her ear. I've got you. Her breath snagged. She set her foot in the stirrup, body swaying. He held fast, eyes never leaving her. At last she found her seat in the saddle, heart racing, not from fear of falling, but from the safety his hand carried. Nathaniel swung up behind her, close, his arm reaching past to hold the reins. She sat stiff, but his back was solid, his breathing calm. The horse moved into the misted trail. Eliza glanced sideways. Nathaniel's eyes stayed forward, but his hand rested light at her waist. No force, only natural, as though it had belonged there always. Her chest tightened, not with shame or dread, but with a new stirring. The seed planted in that single kiss last night. The first sunlight cut through the haze, falling on the small cabin behind. Eliza knew she had left behind a glittering world empty of truth, and stepped into one poor and rough, yet one that could be hers. Beside her, Nathaniel, scarred hands, steady eyes, was the bridge between those two worlds. Eliza's first days in the cabin were marked by clumsy attempts that bordered on tragic. She tried cooking breakfast, but the cornbread blackened to cinders, smoke filling the air until her eyes watered. Nathaniel stepped in, one brow lifted in playful judgment. Well now, I can't tell if that's breakfast or kindling. Her cheeks flamed, shame making her want to flee, but he only chuckled, gently clearing the mess before taking her hand to guide her through the motions of turning the batter. His calloused fingers folded over hers, steady, sure. Later, when she tried milking the cow, the beast swatted her with its tail and kicked the bucket clean over. Eliza collapsed to the dirt, skirts streaked with mud, eyes brimming. Nathaniel came upon her then. Instead of scolding, he knelt, tied the rope firm, and showed her how to set her hand firm but gentle. Milk streamed into the pail, and Eliza let out a shaky laugh of relief. "See?" he teased. "She only needed a little trust." "Same as you." Her smile faltered. The words struck deeper than he knew. That evening the sky turned iron. Wind screamed through the cracks. Rain hammered the roof, as though to tear the hill apart. Eliza had never faced a storm like it. At Freeman Hall, stone walls had kept thunder at a distance. Here, every strike rattled her bones. Nathaniel heaped wood onto the fire. The blaze painted his face in harsh strokes of light and shadow. Eliza drew near, hands trembling on her knees. He noticed, tilted his head. "Frightened?" She nodded, unable to deny it. He pressed a wooden cup into her hands, strong liquor swirling. "Drink. It'll warm you." She hesitated, then tipped it back. The burn raced down her throat, heat pushing out the cold. She coughed, and Nathaniel's smile tugged soft at the edges. Not bad for a first try. The storm roared, but inside, silence grew thick. Their breaths seemed louder than the rain. Eliza raised her eyes to him, finding them steady, touched with something gentler than she expected. Her hand twitched, brushing against the back of his. He didn't move, though his gaze burned hotter. In the haze of whiskey, she reached up, fingertips tracing the rough line of his cheek. His skin was coarse, sun-darkened, but warm. Her voice broke into a whisper. Why did you choose me?" Nathaniel's eyes held hers. "Because I see what this town is blind to, the fire and the steel beneath all that silk. You're not weak, Eliza. You're stronger than most men who swagger out there." The words tore through her defenses. For years, she'd been measured only by beauty and dowry. No one had spoken of her strength. Suddenly she leaned in, brushed her lips against his, fragile, trembling. Then she pulled back with a shy, uncertain smile. Nathaniel caught her hand, voice gone low. "That all? Not near enough." He drew her closer, his arm circling her waist. This kiss was fierce, breath tangled with whiskey, no distance left between them. Eliza gasped, chest rising hard against the tight bodice of her gown. Her hands pressed against his chest, sliding up to the heat beneath coarse cloth. Buttons slipped free, each sound sharp in the hush, doors opening one by one. Nathaniel paused, eyes shadowed, but her gaze, trembling yet sure, pulled him forward. His lips crushed hers, her body yielding, melting. Her back met the thick rug before the hearth. Firelight flared, throwing their shadows wild upon the walls. His rough hands traced her waist, her fragile curves, leaving heat and safety mingled on her skin. Smoke, liquor, and the raw scent of him wrapped around her until her head spun. She closed her eyes as his breath grazed her throat, searing as flame. Eliza shivered, not from fear. Her fingers tangled in his unruly hair, tugging him closer, desperate to fill the hollow inside her. He answered with equal urgency, holding her tighter, kissing deeper. Their breaths fused, sharp, salty, burning with hunger. Yet beneath the wildness was a tenderness strange and new, an unspoken vow that even if the world outside collapsed, this would remain. In the storm's fury, Eliza felt life blaze through her body for the first time, not for duty, not for family pride, but by her own choice. Nathaniel's embrace was no conquest, but a fire fierce enough to brand a promise without words. I am here, no matter what comes. Outside, wind shrieked, rain battered the cabin as if to rip it apart. But within, only firelight remained, smoke, heat, flesh, and two hearts finding freedom in each other's arms. In the days after the storm, life in the little cabin found a rhythm. Awkward at first, yet slowly shaping itself into something Eliza could almost call familiar. Each morning, Nathaniel rose while mist still veiled the pasture, heading to the cattle shed. Eliza followed, stumbling in shoes soaked with dew, skirts tangling at her ankles. In Freeman Hall, she would have remained in bed until a maid brought her tea. Now she pushed herself onward. She wanted to learn. She wanted to prove she could. Her first try at milking left her trembling, coaxing out little more than a few drops. Bessie, the old cow, swished her tail in annoyance, even stomped hard enough to tip the pail. Eliza sagged to the dirt, hands filthy, eyes wet with frustration. Nathaniel appeared, crouched low. "Don't force it," he said gently. Firm, but kind. Like holding something precious that refuses to be tamed. His rough hands closed over hers, guiding her grip. Milk streamed steady into the bucket, the soft rhythm filling the morning stillness. Eliza laughed in relief, and when she lifted her gaze, his eyes caught hers. Her smile lingered in his reflection, and for an instant, the damp cold seemed warmed by something else. Her first meal was a disaster. Bread hard as stone, beans scorched beyond saving. Smoke curled from the pot, stinging her eyes. Nathaniel stepped in, brow raised. "Looks more like charcoal than supper," he teased. Eliza fanned the smoke with her skirts, bristling. "If you think you can do better, go on then." He chuckled, set his hat aside, and took the pan from the flames. "Everyone burns the first pot. Next time, I'll show you how to keep the fire steady." The hearthlight danced across his face as he moved close, hand brushing her waist to keep her skirts from the sparks. The brief touch sent heat rushing to her cheeks. When he murmured, "I reckon I prefer seeing you here at the stove rather than in silk," Eliza nearly forgot to breathe. Moments like that, half accidental, half deliberate, wove a sweet tension through the small cabin. One afternoon, while she ground grain, Nathaniel stood behind her, steadying the stone with his hand over hers. His breath stirred her shoulder. Her pulse raced. She pretended to concentrate, though inside she was in turmoil. One evening, after chores were done, Nathaniel sat by the fire with a weathered leather book. Eliza stepped out of the small room, wrapped in the thin sweater he had given her. "What are you reading?" she asked softly. He looked up, lamplight catching in his eyes. "Shakespeare. Hamlet." He lifted the book, then smiled faintly. "My mother left it to me. She wanted me to remember a man may work with his hands, but his mind deserves its own nourishment." Eliza's breath caught. The image of him, calloused cowboy, bent over Shakespeare in a rough-hewn cabin, startled her. He was more than the simple rescuer she thought she knew. He was layered, complicated, sans mystery. She sat beside him. "You truly like reading?" He nodded, voice low and steady. "I like the way he writes of people. Never only one thing. Noble and weak, tender and cruel. Just like us." She fell silent. In his words, she saw another Nathaniel, deeper and harder to pin down. And she realized that each passing day, he was not only the man who saved her from disgrace, He was awakening a self she had never known. Long evenings drew them closer. By the fire, Eliza confessed how, as a girl, she had dreamed of being a teacher, lining up dolls as pupils. But her parents had dismissed it. A Freeman daughter's duty was marriage, nothing else. Nathaniel listened, eyes fixed on her as though each word carried weight. When she finished, he said, "They can take land, name, even freedom. But dreams die only when you abandon them. And you," his gaze softened, "you are not the kind to give up." She turned away, lips tugged upward despite herself. No one had ever believed in her like that. There were smaller moments, too. His hand over hers when he showed her how to cut cloth for a shirt. His fingers brushing her wrist until she shivered. Their eyes meeting in the kitchen. His gaze so steady she flushed, before he bent and kissed her quick on the lips. Not the fierce, burning kiss of the storm night, but light and sudden. Yet it left her trembling for hours. Day by day, Eliza found her footing. She learned how not to burn beans, how to mend a torn work shirt, how to laugh at mistakes and try again. And each time she faltered, Nathaniel was there, mocking gently, helping quietly, rough and tender in equal measure. Slowly, she stopped seeing the cabin as a prison. It began to feel like a home. In that home, every glance, every touch, every whispered word wove into a fabric stronger than silk or steel. It was the beginning of a life Eliza had never dared to dream, yet now longed to hold on to with all she had. One autumn afternoon, while Nathaniel rode out to check the western fence, Eliza remained in the cabin tidying. She gathered blankets, dusted shelves, and by chance brushed against the old Bible resting on the corner of the table. The book toppled, its worn cover striking the floor, and the board beneath shifted slightly. Curiosity prickled. She knelt, slid her fingers under the plank, and lifted. It gave more easily than she expected. Beneath, not dust, but a thick roll of bills bound with twine. Eliza froze. The sight made her vision swim. No common cowhand could possess such a sum. Her heart pounded as she pulled the bundle free. Crisp notes, straight and new, not the earnings of poverty. A chill raced her spine. One thought pulsed in her mind. Smuggling? Theft? Murder? When Nathaniel returned, sweat streaking his shirt after a day's work, he stepped through the door and stopped short. Eliza sat at the table, the roll of money laid bare before her. Her eyes were dark, stripped of the softness he had come to know. "Nathaniel, what is this?" He halted in the doorway, shadow stretching across the floor. His gaze flicked to the money, then to her face. In an instant, warmth drained away, replaced by something guarded, unfamiliar. "It isn't your concern," he said slowly, his voice weighted like lead. Eliza leaned back, bitter laughter covering her trembling. "Not my concern. I'm your wife. I share this roof, this bread, this life, and you tell me it isn't my concern?" Nathaniel set his hat on the table but did not sit. "You only need to trust me. The money is clean, enough for us to live safe. Trust." Her voice cracked. "Since stepping into this cabin, I've done nothing but trust. Trust that you wanted a marriage. Trust that you saw me as more than ruined goods. And now this hidden stash. Who are you, Nathaniel? A gun runner? A bootlegger? Or worse?" His face hardened, jaw clenched. "Don't push too far, Eliza. Then explain, she burst out, throat tight. Just one word of truth. I've lost everything. Family, name, honor. You're all I have left, and now even you are a secret I cannot grasp. Silence. Nathaniel's eyes stayed on her, dark and fathomless, his quiet pressed heavier than a confession of guilt. Her knees shook. The fire popped in the stove, mocking the void between them. Her whisper broke. Every word weighted. You don't trust me enough to speak the truth. Then how am I to trust you? His hands balled into fists, veins taut. When the time comes, you'll understand. She gave a hollow laugh, tears rising. When? When I see you hanged in town for smuggling? Or when some man comes to our door to claim your life? Nathaniel yanked the door open and strode into the night. His broad back vanished into darkness. For 3 days, the cabin drowned in silence. Eliza worked quietly, sweeping, cooking, mending, yet no laughter broke her lips. No stray remark drew a chuckle from him. She watched from the window as he split logs barebacked in the sun, but did not step outside. He came in at dusk, left his hat on the table, but avoided her eyes. Their words shrank to necessities. Water's boiled. The cow needs fodder. Rain's coming. Each phrase like a shard of glass cutting through the stillness. At night, Eliza lay with her back to the wall, far from the shoulder that had once been her refuge. Nathaniel spread his blanket on the floor and lay silent. The tiny cabin, once close and warm, now held a gulf wider than any plain. Eliza pressed her eyes shut, but tears slipped free. She had believed she had escaped the hell of the Crystal Palace, that she had found a beginning in his arms. Yet with this secret, unanswered and looming, she felt cast back to the start. Alone, adrift, uncertain if she could ever dare to trust again. On the 4th morning after their quarrel, silence once again ruled the cabin. Nathaniel had left at dawn, axe in hand, his face locked shut, leaving Eliza alone with the hearth and the storm inside her mind. She moved through her chores like a machine, dusting shelves, folding clothes, but her thoughts circled endlessly around the roll of money hidden under the floorboards. Who was he? Why the secrecy? As she lifted a stack of old books near the stove, the Bible that had once belonged to his mother slipped and hit the ground. A brittle sheet of yellowed paper slid free, fluttering to rest at her feet. She stooped to replace it, but the bold headline froze her in place. Heir to Harrington fortune disappears. The clipping was aged, but the print still sharp. Eliza's fingers trembled as she unfolded it. Nathaniel Harrington, age 26, only son of the late ranch baron Charles Harrington, has abandoned his inheritance of $2 million and vanished. Sources claim he was disillusioned with a life of wealth and status, declaring he wished only to know if anyone could love him for himself, not for his fortune. Eliza sank into a chair, clutching the page. The scattered pieces began to fit. The hidden money, the way Nathaniel sometimes stared into distance, the guarded depths in his eyes. He wasn't a smuggler, not an outlaw. He was the heir to a vast fortune, who had chosen to live as a common man. Relief and fury warred in her chest. Relief that he wasn't criminal. Fury that he had kept her in the dark, left her doubting, forced her to endure sleepless nights haunted by fear that her trust had been misplaced. The door swung open. Nathaniel entered, shirt dark with sweat, sun and dust clinging to him. Eliza sprang up, the clipping trembling in her hand. "What is this?" Her voice shook, sharp as steel. His eyes flicked to the paper. For an instant she caught resignation there. He set the axe down slowly, stepped closer. "So you've found it. How long did you plan to keep this from me?" Her hands quivered. "I thought you were a smuggler, a criminal. I lay awake, terrified, while you stayed silent." Nathaniel faced her squarely, voice low. "I didn't want you to love a name, or a fortune, or a legacy. I wanted you to love this man, the one who mends fences beside you, who cooks a meal, who listens when you speak of childhood dreams." "But you deceived me!" Eliza's tears broke free. "You let me believe the worst of you." "Is that what true love does?" His fists tightened, then slowly unclenched. He stepped nearer. "I was afraid, Eliza. All my life, every gaze turned toward me was weighed with Harrington wealth. I walked away only to find someone who would see me plain. I found you, but I was a coward, too fearful to speak the truth." Her eyes, wet and burning, held his. "Do you think I care for money? After all I've lost? My honor, my standing, my family? I only need one place where I can be myself." Nathaniel faltered. His hand rose, resting on her shoulder, trembling. "Then forgive me. I was wrong not to believe you strong enough to bear the truth." She lifted her gaze, tears glinting in the shaft of afternoon light. For the first time since the stormy night, she saw fear in him, not of losing land or legacy, but of losing her. The anger within her cracked. She stepped forward, pressed her face to his chest. His arms closed around her, fierce, as if letting go would shatter them both. "I was not wrong to choose you," she whispered, voice breaking. Nathaniel bowed his head into her hair, words rough with feeling. "I love you, Eliza. For the first time in my life, I dare say it. I love you not because you are my wife in name, but because you are you, the woman who held her head high through disgrace, who laughed with mud on her hands, who touched the best in me that I'd forgotten." Eliza closed her eyes, the last tears falling. Against his chest, she heard his heartbeat steady, honest, unshakable. His embrace was not to shield a fragile girl, but to confess a truth. They needed each other, as flame needs air, as steel needs fire to be forged. They stood long in that silence, letting anger, fear, and revelation melt into one. When she lifted her face, their eyes met, no longer strangers, but two souls stripped bare. Nathaniel bent, kissed her lips, not with whiskey, not with wrath, but with tender desperation. Eliza answered, for the first time without hesitation. And in that kiss, they knew. Secrets may be laid bare, but love once true could never be hidden. The great iron gates of Harrington Estate creaked open, carriage wheels crunching over white gravel that wound toward the towering stone mansion. Ivy clung to its walls, roses bloomed in neat rows, and the fading light of afternoon struck tall windows like mirrors of fire. Nathaniel, no longer the nameless cowboy in dusty boots, offered his hand to Eliza as she stepped down. Her fingers trembled, but his gaze was steady. "From this day, this is our home." Word of the heir's return had spread across the territory, and a grand reception was arranged in his honor. Eliza wore a gown of deep blue silk, simple yet striking, far removed from the gaudy frills of the Crystal Palace. When she looked into the mirror, she did not see a forsaken bride but a woman who had chosen her husband by her own will. The hall glittered with hundreds of crystal chandeliers. Violins sang sharp and sweet. Laughter and chatter rolled like a restless tide, mingled with the scent of wine and lavender. Guests swarmed Nathaniel, eager to greet the man they once thought gone forever. Eliza walked beside him, pride tightening her spine, though unease rippled beneath. Eyes followed them, curious, doubtful, some even envious. Then, across the throng, a familiar laugh cut through the music like a blade. Victor Hale. He stepped forward from a circle of merchants, polished as ever, arrogance painted on his smile. His eyes widened for an instant at the sight of Eliza, then gleamed with cruel delight. "Eliza Freeman," he drawled, bowing with mock grace. "I thought you vanished after last year's little mishap, and yet here you are, in a hall of splendor. Tell me, have you found yourself another wealthy man to cling to?" A hush swept through the room, whispers rising sharp as thorns. Damaged goods, the broken engagement, the disgrace. Eliza froze. The memory of Crystal Palace surged back. Blinding lights, mocking laughter, her trembling hand clutched around satin skirts. For a breath, she feared her knees would fail her again. But Nathaniel's grip tightened, pulling her close. His hand claimed her waist with firm resolve. He turned toward Victor, his voice deep, carrying through the hall. "She is not seeking another wealthy man. She is my wife's." Silence crashed over the gathering. Victor barked a short laugh, though his voice cracked at the edges. "Your wife? You mean to tell me she managed to snare the Harrington heir himself?" Nathaniel's mouth curved, cold as steel. "No, Eliza snared no one. I chose her. Out of 1,000 faces that saw only my fortune, I chose the woman with fire in her heart and steel in her eyes." Eliza lifted her chin. She did not flinch. Her dark eyes, once drowned in shame, now burned with quiet pride. Sliding her fingers between Nathaniel's, she held fast, declaring without words, "I am his wife. I stand here by right, not by permission." Victor's smirk faltered, color rising hot in his face. Around him, whispers shifted, tone, no longer scorn, but awe, envy, reluctant admiration. Those who had once mocked Eliza now looked upon her as Mrs. Harrington. His mouth opened as if to retort, but nothing came. He lowered his glass, retreating into the crowd with humiliation staining his cheeks. Music swelled again, though its notes sounded different now, as though the entire hall had bent to a new order. Nathaniel bent low, whispering against Eliza's ear, his words for her alone. "You will never bow your head again." Her hand squeezed his, tears rising but her smile breaking through. In the mirrored glass along the wall, she caught her reflection. Not a discarded bride, not trembling satin under cruel laughter, but a wife standing tall, claimed by the man she chose, seen by the world at last for who she truly was. Harrington Estate, once only a name on a yellowed newspaper, had become Eliza's true home. The ivy-clad stone walls, the endless corridors lit by golden lamps, had at first overwhelmed her. But with Nathaniel's hand in hers, every cold chamber held warmth, every shadow carried light. Nathaniel had returned not simply to reclaim the Harrington honor, but to shape something larger, a legacy for both of them, a place that could belong to generations yet to come. And Eliza, after months of doubt and heartbreak, at last saw her place, not as a wife hidden behind him, but as a partner walking at his side. That spring, they began to expand the ranch. Nathaniel hired more men, raised new barns, and brought hardy cattle from Kansas. Yet what filled Eliza with the deepest pride was when he listened, truly listened, to her vision, to build a small school on the southern tract near the creek. A school for Negro children? The old overseers scoffed. It'll be money wasted, sir. Nathaniel gave them no reply. He only turned to Eliza, his eyes steady. If it is your dream, then it is mine too. So the first bricks were laid, Eliza's own hands pressing them into place. She thought of her girlhood, lining up dolls on a table, whispering lessons by candlelight, dreams dismissed by her parents. Now the dream stood solid in timber and stone, ready to welcome more than her own imagination. On opening day, 24 children crept shyly into the sunlit room, clutching books still smelling of fresh ink. Eliza stood at the wooden lectern, heart tight, as their voices joined in unison to sound out the alphabet. From the back row, Nathaniel watched, silent, pride burning bright in his gaze. Their family, too, blossomed with the seasons. A year after the storm-born wedding, Eliza bore a son. Nathaniel held the small bundle as though the weight might break him, his rough, work-scarred hands trembling. Name him, he whispered, eyes fixed on the tiny face. Samuel, Eliza said through tears. So we will never forget the journey, from a night of shame to this day. The next year brought a daughter. Nathaniel named her Clara, after the mother who had left him the Bible and the love of words. Holding the infant, Eliza murmured, You will grow in a world where daughters may dream and choose for themselves. The great house filled with laughter. Small feet clattered across oak staircases. Giggles echoed down vast halls once silent. Often Nathaniel sat on the veranda, Samuel perched on his shoulders, Clara cradled in Eliza's arms, while the setting sun spread gold over the fields. At night, when the children slept, they lingered by the hearth, the fire crackling low. Eliza rested her head against his shoulder and whispered, Do you remember? That storm when we had only whiskey and a pile of firewood? Nathaniel chuckled, kissing her hair. I remember. And I know if not for that night, I would not have this life. She lifted her gaze, her dark eyes glowing with pride and peace. She was no longer the woman whispered about behind fans and crystal glasses. She was Eliza Harrington, wife, mother, builder of a dream turned legacy. Years later, Samuel would ride horses across the pastures. Clara would carry books into the very school her mother had built. And Eliza and Nathaniel would stand together, hands entwined, watching the new generation rise. Legacy is not only land or fortune, Nathaniel said softly. It is what remains when we are gone. Dreams, love, courage. Eliza squeezed his hand, her heart whispering the words she had carried since the day she chose him. No regrets. 10 years swept by like wind over the prairie. Harrington Estate was no longer merely an inheritance, but a thriving community, where laughter carried across fields and new homesteads rose near the ranch. Eliza sat on the wide wooden porch, her rocker creaking beneath the golden glow of dusk. Her hair, once black as midnight, now bore threads of silver, yet her eyes still burned as bright, deep and proud as ever. Beside her, Nathaniel sat quiet, his sun-browned face lined by the years, his scarred hands steady around a glass of red wine. Before them lay a picture worthy of canvas, barley fields rippling in the breeze, cattle grazing slow and sure, and beyond the grove, the red roof of the schoolhouse Eliza had once dreamed into being. It was no longer a room of 24 pupils, but a beacon for the whole valley, where hundreds of children, black and white together, learned beneath one roof. Hoofbeats thundered from afar, and Samuel appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, the image of his father in youth. He swung from his horse with an easy grace, his grin bright as he greeted them. "I led the men north today. The harvest looks strong. You'll be proud." Father Nathaniel nodded, pride plain in his eyes. "I don't need a bumper crop to be proud, Samuel. I'm proud because you keep your word and walk straight." Eliza's smile softened as she studied her grown son. No longer the swaddled infant she once rocked, but a man who carried his father's strength and his mother's quiet faith. From the back porch, Clara stepped forward, white dress fluttering, a book tucked in her arm. 17 now, with eyes as radiant as Eliza's once were, and her father's calm in her bearing. "Mother, I taught the little ones poetry today." One child recited Shakespeare by heart. Eliza kissed her daughter's hair. "You've given life to the dream I once carried. That is more than enough to make mine complete." As evening deepened, Samuel and Clara drifted off with friends, leaving the porch still save for the two who had begun it all. Eliza leaned her head to Nathaniel's shoulder, listening to his heartbeat, steady as the earth. He spoke slowly, with a trace of humor. "Do you remember that reckless night at the Silver Dollar? I proposed to a trembling girl whose hand shook even as she held her drink." Eliza laughed, the sound mingling with the prairie breeze. "And I said yes out of whiskey and despair." Nathaniel turned, eyes alight though streaked with gray. "No, you said yes because your heart was ready, waiting for someone brave enough to reach for it. I only did as promised. Oblige when you needed a husband." Eliza bit her lip, eyes glistening. "Had you not offered your hand that night, I might have been lost forever in the shadows of Crystal Palace." He gripped her fingers firmly, rough palm closing over her softness. "And had you not spoken that word, I would never have known what true love was." Silence stretched, filled only by crickets and the whisper of wind in the fields. Eliza lifted her gaze toward the sky where a young moon hung pale. "We've traveled far, Nathaniel," she murmured. "From the storm in the cabin, to the day our son first rode a horse, to the schoolyard filled with children's laughter. I need nothing more." Nathaniel kissed her brow, lingering and warm. "I hope for one thing more, that you'll always sit here with me, until our eyes grow dim and our hands grow frail, yet still we hold each other fast." Tears shimmered in her smile. She felt the whole weight of their journey, humiliation, despair, hope, and at last, a love beyond denial. Their story, seen from afar, was not a grand ballad. It began with collapse, with a drunken proposal in a smoky saloon, with a storm that left two hearts trembling. Yet from that rubble they built a legacy: ranch, school, children, and most of all, a bond stronger than pride or shame. Eliza's chin lifted, pride unmasked in her eyes. She now understood. True love was never born of chandeliers or gilded vows. It was found in unlikely places: a night of disgrace at Crystal Palace, a saloon clouded with smoke, the hand of a stranger bold enough to reach. And from that single moment, their lives were forever changed. Dear friends, perhaps each of us carries such a memory: a late beginning, an unexpected love or a dream planted in barren soil that grew against all odds. Share your stories in the comments below. Your memory might become another's courage. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to journey with us through more Wild West love stories filled with echoes and meaning. For love, at any age, always finds its season to bloom.